our special presentation brought to you by Aaron's House and Motown Maurice Productions. Rally for support. Please join me and welcome the founder of Aaron's House, Pamela Robinson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are pleased to announce that Aaron's House has partnered with Motown Maurice Productions to bring you a rally for support. The purpose of this Webithon is to share with you what it is that Aaron's House does. Aaron's House provides support to caregivers of people with mental illnesses. No matter what the illness is, bipolar, schizophrenia, autism, if you are a caregiver, Aaron's House provides support to you. We provide support via weekly support groups, respite, education, and care. This Webathon is to ask you and encourage you to donate to our cause. If you would click the link in the description below, you would see how to donate. You can donate via PayPal. You can donate via Cashapp, but our handle is the $ caregivers 813, and with any major credit card. Be sure to email us your address, because with a donation of $25 or more, you will receive this Aaron's House face mask. Let me put it on if I can. Okay, the face mask says mental health matters, and it's our logo, Aaron's House. So with a donation of $25 or more, you will receive the Aaron's House face mask. As you can see, it's very colorful. It's made of 100% cotton, and you will be in style while you're wearing this. The monies that we receive through donation will be used for the caregivers. And one of the projects that we are working on in 2021 is that we want to be able to send a support person or a case manager into the homes of the caregivers. Oftentimes when people have mental illnesses, they do not come out, they won't leave their homes. So therefore, caregivers need help in dealing with that situation. So that is one of the reasons, one of our goals for 2021 is to support the caregivers in that manner. So are you ready for this? I mean, we have been planning and up all night, and we are just so excited to present to you this event. Our topic for today, for this segment, is Help is Here, Don't Suffer in Silence. It will be hosted by award-winning journalist, TV anchorman for Channel 8 News, Rod Carter. Rod has been a friend of Aaron's House ever since we've been up and going, and he does a marvelous job for all of our events. I'd like to remind you, and this is my favorite section of this event, is the Q&A. So you will be able to ask questions of the host and the panelists. No question is off limits. So please feel free, if you have a question, no matter how insignificant you may think it is, please ask. So right now, we're going to go to commercial break, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Rally for Support will be right back after a trip down memory lane.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rod Carter with WFLA News Channel 8, but I'm so honored to be here with you all virtually today to have this very important conversation for Aaron's House, this Rally for Support Webathon. Throughout the rest of this afternoon, for the next several minutes, we're going to be talking about some very important topics, give you a chance to help Aaron's House in their mission. So I want to thank everyone for being here and for tuning in to this broadcast. This is an extremely important conversation that we need to have. And I want to say, before we get started, a big old happy birthday to Pam Robinson. Today is her birthday, and it was not by accident that we had this on today. So we want to wish her a very, very happy birthday. You probably are wondering who's going to be talking besides Rod Carter, because we don't want to hear him all day. I agree with you. We don't. So we have a great panel of folks who are going to be with us today to have this important conversation. I'll introduce them in the order that I have them on my list. We'll begin with Dr. Marketa Wills, who's a psychiatrist. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Wills. Natasha A. Pierre, a peer and mental health educator who is joining us as well, and a wonderful caregiver, Elizabeth Cowen. Thank you all so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to have this important conversation. So just for the folks who are watching, you'll have a chance to ask some questions as well. I'll try to guide the conversation, but we'll get to as many of those questions as possible. So I want to kind of start at the top of this, and I'm just going to throw it out, and whoever wants to answer, just chime right in. Mental health conversations are something that everyone should really be having, but it's extremely difficult to do. Why is it so hard for people to have a conversation about mental health?
Well, I'll jump in as one who lives with a diagnosis. One of the reasons why it's hard to have the conversation is that mental health challenges or mental illness for many people is still synonymous with a weakness. And no one wants to admit that they are weak or vulnerable or lacking, especially in a society that is as performance-driven as ours. So part of my work as an educator is to normalize that mental health is health. And in the same way someone would be comfortable saying that they're taking off to go to the dentist, we need to normalize being able to say, I need to see my psychologist or psychiatrist, or I need a mental health day.
Dr. Wills, I'll move down the line and ask you, what I heard in that answer was there are a lot of stigmas associated with mental health. What are some of those stigmas that are associated? And give us some ways that we can kind of remove that.
Yeah, what I heard and Natasha talk about very vividly was this idea of stigma, or the notion that somehow that you're tarnished or you're broken if you have a mental health diagnosis. And similarly, one of the things that we can do is do just what we're doing: have good, open dialogues about mental health and mental wellness. And put it in our schools. I think there's a big movement now for social and emotional learning, where kids are beginning to talk a little bit more about their mental health. I don't even think we have a language to describe our emotions and how we feel. We don't really have those kind of dialogues. If you feel bad, stuff it. Don't feel bad. If you feel angry, not good. Don't feel bad. But you don't say, hey, wait a minute. Teach people how to process their feelings, process their emotions, do something with that anger, do something with that jealousy, do something with that envy. These are all normal emotions that come up that we all feel from time to time. Let's even have a conversation about that, and how to move forward and get through that. But we don't really teach that, because it's like, that's bad, don't do it. And then that gets stuffed. And guess what? Even if it gets stuffed, it comes out somewhere. Either you overeat, or you can't sleep, or you're irritable, or you're this or you're that. So it's better just to acknowledge and have rich, good dialogues like this, where we can talk about mental health, mental illness, mental wellness, the whole kit and caboodle.
Elizabeth, you are a caregiver, and you have these conversations on a daily basis as well. Talk a little bit about how you get that conversation going, and then how you keep that conversation alive.
Yeah, I think you really have to just step out there and not be afraid to have the conversations, because there is a lot of stigma around when someone says they have a mental illness. And you have to really get that person to understand that it's nothing they did wrong. It's nothing that they did to make this happen to themselves. That just like Natasha was saying, that, if you have an illness, you're going to take a medication for it. Like if you have diabetes, it has to become normal, not that there's something wrong with you or you did something to deserve this.
So Aaron's House has done a fantastic job of keeping this conversation going. And I think we could all try to figure out how we all know Pam, but we're so grateful to her. And this is a great birthday present, because this is a vision, this is a dream of hers, to have this conversation and to talk about these things. Natasha, how did you meet Pam?
I met Pam actually at a town hall meeting, the same town hall where I met you. It was December 3rd, 2018. I was on my path to dealing with my own self-stigma relative to my diagnosis. And I attended the town hall, and the conversation was so rich. that was the night that I realized that there was more that I could do, that my story, my experience, my mental health journey wasn't just for me, but it was for me to really be a voice in the Tampa Bay area of what mental illness looks like, how it can show up, what how treatment can look when it works. And after I had a conversation with Pam, and I really credit her, so happy birthday to Pam, as being one of the people who contributed to my today, one of the people who looked beyond the illness to see the individual, and really brought me on with Erin's House. And I'm proud of the work that she's doing with supporting caregivers in our area. So thank you, Pam.
Now, my memory does falter a little bit. I'll fully admit that. But I seem to remember, Natasha, you mentioning that you moved here from New York.
Well, New York was one of my stops. It was Maryland. So Maryland was the stop right before here. And, even I'll give a shout out to the Hillsborough Sheriff's Office, because that night we had a very lengthy conversation about the crisis intervention program. And from that town hall, the Sheriff's Department not only revised their CIT program, but they implemented it, deployed it, and everyone in the department has that training. And that was largely due to the efforts of Deputy Stephanie Krager and the entire HCSO. So there's a lot that came from that night.
That's great. What I wanted to do was to talk a little bit about the resources that people have here in Florida. And Dr. Wills, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think we do enough in Florida, and if you want to broaden it out to the rest of the country, to address mental health issues and stigmas in our community?
Well, there can always be more done. And if there's at least one silver lining of COVID, and I know this has been a challenging time for everyone, I think that COVID has allowed more people to relate to the importance of mental health and mental wellness. And so conversations like these are being amplified in ways that I personally haven't seen pre-COVID. So I'm really excited about that because I think everybody understands, virtual learning with the kids, being holed up in the house, no outlets for normal outlets. So we've all had a loss and change. And so we're all talking about it, but it's my belief that we can always talk about it more. Resources, Mental Health of America is one great national organization. And I do believe there's a Florida chapter. The organization through which I met Natasha Pierre, which is NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. I'm a former board member of the Hillsborough County chapter. Great organization nationwide to begin to destigmatize. And there are other things that are going on through the United Way, individual nonprofit organizations such as these. We talked about the law enforcement intersectionality, which is a critical one that is so important to have CIT things throughout the country. I spent a lot of time in Houston. And so Houston has a model CIT program where they engage, sheriffs and deputies and law enforcement with mental health practitioners and have that tag team approach as they're addressing mental health crises. And so that there can be a focus on de-escalation rather than retaliation for behaviors. And I think the more that gets embedded in communities, the more less stigma we'll have in accidents like what happened in Philadelphia recently, where a gentleman was shot who was having a mental health crisis and the police had called them and they just didn't know, it just escalated from there. So I think the more that we embed and have that conversation in every aspect, churches, that's another area where there's a great opportunity to be synergistic. People are coming oftentimes to church to lay their burdens down, coming to their pastors. And the more we educate pastors and clergy and deaconesses and deacons to be able to understand, okay, well, when somebody's talking about trying to harm themselves, let's get them to somebody who's of God and who also has a specialty and an anointing in that area and dealing with people who have mental health and mental wellness and can shuttle them in. So lots of work we can do. And I'm so grateful for Erin's House for providing its special niche for caregivers. So.
Absolutely. Speaking of, Elizabeth, when did you first realize that your loved one might be suffering from a mental illness? And what was that process like for you?
It was a few years ago that our son was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but it took a long time to get to that point because there's just, some things that are happening that you don't feel like something's quite right, but you're not really sure. And again, there's the stigma around like, well, do I go to our normal doctor? What is that going to look like? Are they going to think they're quote unquote, crazy? So it takes a while because there is a lack of care, a lack of coordination to get to a final diagnosis. And then once you even get the diagnosis, it's a long time to begin to find the right treatment, the right team, the right, people to surround yourself with. So, and then, I met Pam through Dr. Wills, actually. She introduced me to Aaron's house. She knew that I was struggling with, our son and the whole situation of feeling alone. And so she connected me with Pam and Aaron's house. It's been an amazing journey with them.
And I'm going to go back to Dr. Wills just for a minute, because I want to talk about some of the ways that we can help people address these issues. And what are some of the, what treatment do you recommend for someone struggling with depression?
Yeah. So treatment for depression is largely the first thing that I would encourage people to do is to engage in talk therapy. Talk therapy is usually the first modality that I would recommend. Therapy, a 6 to 8 week course of what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, usually is a great way to impact someone who is suffering from depression. Now, that being said, if someone's course of depression is so severe, where they're thinking about wanting to harm themselves or not able to keep themselves safe, or let's say they haven't gotten out of the bed, brushed their teeth, washed their face. Let's say they are sleeping all day, and that does happen. Sometimes people can't quite see how that happens, but that does happen, where the whole architecture of their life, that's someone that I would put on medication immediately. And they're very safe, easy medications that would help someone within 6 to 8 weeks come back to themselves. So studies show that someone with with moderate depression, with a trial of CBT, will have a 60% chance of getting back to baseline. With medications, it's more like an 80% chance. And with therapy and medications together, it's closer to a 90 to 95% chance of coming back to baseline. So that's the thing about these disorders. They're so treatable. They're so treatable, and we know how to treat them, but people go around not seeing, not knowing, not wanting to admit, not getting it. But once they do and they address it, it's like, oh, the light's on. I'm ready for life again. And I know that there are lots of reasons why people are adverse to treatment in different communities, not wanting to go and tell their business to someone. That's a big one. I hear that all the time. That, well, why can't I just work it out with my friends and family? Like, why do I have to go tell somebody my business? But what you have to remember is it's not just telling somebody your business. It's actually going to a trained professional who has expertise in human emotions, human behaviors, who's able to help you move forward, right? In a way that some friends and family kind of have that gift, but doing it for yourself in a therapeutic setting makes all the difference. So yeah, there are treatments for medication for depression.
And Natasha, I want to roll back around to you. How old were you when you realized that you needed to have mental health support? And the stigmas that she just mentioned, like, I don't want to tell anybody, was that a factor in your decision and what it took to get that help? And,
Absolutely.
Were you afraid of the Pandora's box opening up?
Absolutely. In hindsight, I knew from age 9 that I was having a tough time because I found a poem that I wrote at age 9 about jumping off a building. So I know through my journals that there was evidence of significant depression throughout my life. Had an amazing childhood, top banana, top high achiever. And that's also a component of the self-stigma, because I've always been a high achiever, because I've been successful in so many areas of my life. How could it be that I am losing my mind? And it got to a point for me where the shame and the pain of remaining silent and not speaking to someone and not sharing what I was going through that was hurting me more than whatever stigma could come my way. And truth be told, I do have days where I think, okay, is today the day where everyone judges me for, being diagnosed with bipolar disorder? Is today the day where my diagnosis is used against me? And I think it's important to share two things. The coronavirus and the pandemic is not creating mental illness. For some people, they're having mental health challenges just because we're in a pandemic. For others, conditions, symptoms that have laid dormant for years are now rising to the surface. And, to Dr. Wills' point, what makes Aaron's house so unique is that they focus on the caregiver. They focus on the family member, the spouse, the parent, the sibling, because they also have a lived experience. I'm a peer, so I'm only focused on what I'm going through, what I'm dealing with, but there are people who have to deal with me. And think about it. There are parents who are at home 24 hours a day with their adult children who have a diagnosis, who may or may not be on meds, who may or may not be symptomatic. And those people need support. And Aaron's house provides a support. I hear you, I get it, my son too, my daughter too. And that's so important in our communities because there are many people suffering in silos. There are people across the Tampa Bay area that thinks they're the only parent that's dealing with this. And what did I do? Did I eat too much hot Cheetos? Did I not, go organic when I was pregnant? And none of it has anything to do with it. So it's so important that we connect.
And I want to make sure that people realize that, Aaron's house is here, but they need help to continue. So I want to make sure that folks know that they can donate. This is a Webathon. We want people to support Aaron's house. So you can donate through Cashapp by using $Caregivers813. $Caregivers813. I'm going to try to remember to keep saying that because the work that they do at Aaron's house is so vitally important. Elizabeth, when you had a chat with your son and you realized what was going on, that there was an issue, how difficult was it to get your son to talk about it?
That's still a challenge right now. It's taken 3 years to get to the point where he's actually on medication and taking it mostly willingly. So it's still a challenge. I wouldn't say that. I think every day, it's like making sure that he's taking the medicine, making sure that he understands why. Because, with mental illness, there's a lack of insight. So that's a real challenge.
What do we do if we know someone, and this is open to anyone, if we know someone and we think they may be suicidal, what's the best way to handle that delicately and get people the help they need?
Ask them outright. Many people are afraid to even talk about mental illness and even more afraid of addressing anything relative to suicide. If you think someone might be suicidal, the most courageous thing you can do in that moment is ask them right out. Are you suicidal? Are you thinking about taking your life? Do you have a plan? And do not leave them alone. That's not, Dr. Will said it, the courageous conversations. People are dying because we're afraid of getting it wrong. I rather have someone say, are you mentally ill, and not use the correct terminology than to allow me to feel that I am alone. Just come right out and ask the question.
I second that wholeheartedly. I think there's a feeling that if I say they're suicidal, maybe I'll put that idea in their mind. And then we have such a bad language around suicide. Like you commit crimes, you commit murder, and we say you commit suicide. And that language makes it so that people just don't want to talk about it. It's like the last sin that anybody wants to talk about. But what it is a person who has feelings of wanting to harm themselves. We have to change the language around it so that we're not even terrified to even address it. And, one of my favorite friend, she's like, I found out somebody was suicidal and I just had to walk away. I mean, it literally can freak people out. We got to let that go. We got to talk about it. We got to be each other's keepers. We got to be able to ask, hey, are you feeling that kind of way? And if so, call 911, call PCP, primary care physician, be with that person. Like Natasha said, let's not be afraid of it. Let's push through, because those are preventable lives and we all have that responsibility. And it's so treatable. Again, back to your earlier question, Rod, so treatable. I am doing a little bit of a self plug, but a little bit of how I met Pam. I met Pam because I had released a book that was written for family and friends. It's called Understanding Mental Illness, a comprehensive guide to mental health disorders for family and friends. And I was here in Tampa Bay. The book got released, and she was like, she knows about the family and friends piece of it, because the thing of the matter, as Natasha said, and as Liz is saying, you don't just have that person. You have a whole ecosystem around that person that needs to understand. And we wanted more and more people to feel empowered and be able to have those conversations with their loved ones. So yeah, that's how I met Pam. She was like, I want you to be involved with Aaron's house because you get the family and friends thing. And I was like, I'm there. So that's why I'm here.
So a couple of things that you said made me want to ask a couple of questions. I want to roll back to the stigma piece of it. You said suicide, people think it's the last sin. How difficult is it for people to get past? Because in church you learn, or you're taught, I should say, that suicide is a sin. You can't ask for forgiveness. You're going straight to hell. And that's just what people are taught. How do you help people understand how to navigate that in their lives and kind of put all of those things together and go, no, you can get help. This is, you just talk about it.
Go ahead, Natasha.
I know that's a big
I think people have a fear of suicide because we have not spoken about it and they don't understand suicide. There is a difference between being suicidal and having suicidal thoughts. A suicidal thought could just be, oh my God, I wish everybody would just go away. Or I wish I could, a hole would just open up and take me, or I should jump off, or I should do. And the way that I explain it to people is, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, you don't stop noticing other good-looking people on the planet. You know that good-looking people exist. You're just not acting on it. It's the same thing with suicidal thoughts. They may come into your mind, but you aren't acting on it. Now, the sin part of it, the way that I have dealt with that for myself and the way that I share with others is, tell me about your God. If your God is a benevolent, kind, loving God, then would he damn you to hell because you are in that much emotional, psychological, and physical pain? Do you know, I don't think people understand that, suicide isn't the first checkbox. Suicide is after we've tried absolutely everything and nothing has worked to relieve the emotional and psychological pain. Then it's like, okay, yeah, this has got to be it. So the pain that a person is in, the reason why we say have that conversation, ask the question, is we're just looking for hope. Let me know that I'm not the only person on the planet that feels this way, or that there is something else that I may not have tried that can relieve my pain. When a person no longer has hope that tomorrow can be better, that tomorrow can be happier, that tomorrow can be, the pill will work, that's when suicide enters the mind. So I just tell me what you think about suicide. Tell me why you think your loving, amazing God would kill you or damn you to hell because you're in pain. Let's talk about it.
Natasha, in Black and brown communities, you don't do that.
And that is where we need to start.
Suffer in silence. How do you get people to not do that?
I am unapologetic with sharing my story, and I'm going to keep talking because I'm Caribbean. So in the Caribbean, we don't talk about it. In Black America, we don't talk about it. We it's the uncle, the weird uncle in the attic. He's just touched, the cousin that's different. No, we need to give language to our pain. We can't heal what we won't hear. We can't heal what we won't be honest about. If it's possible for me to have degrees and credentials and certificates and all of this, and at the same time, I'm in emotional pain, I'm depressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm having thoughts of suicide, you cannot just care about what I'm able to do. You got to care about me as a being, as a person. And if I never do anything again in life, My life has value, and it's worth you asking me right out, how are you feeling? How can I support you? What do you need? I care about your life enough for this uncomfortable dialogue. And I'm going to stay with you until I can connect you to Dr. Wills or to Aaron's house or to what the next step may be.
So, Dr. Wills, you said, and this question actually is going to go to Elizabeth, but it's something that you said that stuck out to me. You said friends and family who are, dealing with those who have mental health issues, that it's tough for them. Elizabeth, how do you handle that piece of it? I mean, because you're in a situation where you got to take care of your son, but how do you take care of you?
That's a great question, because self-care is very important. So for my husband and I, our faith is very strong in God. And without God, I don't think we would have been able to get through many days and many nights. The connection with Aaron's house was it was critical. By Dr. Wills connecting us with Aaron's house, we were able to join support groups that have licensed clinical psychologists and psychiatrists that are leading the meetings. That can give you immediate advice and give you, this is what I think you should do in this situation. So that, us having our family support, prayer, as well as, Aaron's house and connecting with other people that are going through similar situations.
And me and Elizabeth met at church. And so that's one of the things. I was giving a talk at a Black church about mental health and mental wellness. And so, I really think the church is an important piece of this because, as you said, Brad, in Black and Brown communities, we're taught so many things, but it's so wonderful when your pastor, and I think that's what had my dad to open, when your pastor is like, let's talk, y'all. We got to talk. And when he opened that window up, Elizabeth came after that and said, hey, and it just so happened we worked together too. So she is like, can we talk? Can we? And I was like, absolutely. And then I had Aaron's house on my mind, had met Pam, and I was like, everybody I meet who's a mom, and moms, I get my heart, I send them to Pam because I know they're going to be loved up and self-cared up and all that. And it's such an important resource in our community. I've actually sent people from out of Tampa, now that we're in this virtual environment, to Aaron's house to connect in with this special community of caretakers.
I want to remind people who are watching that you can submit questions. We really need your questions because I got a lot of them, but I could use some help.
Rod? On the subject of spirituality, I think that there's room for pastors to realize that they don't have everything on lock, and that sometimes religion and spirituality has been weaponized against people with mental illness. So one of the things that I've been told is, Natasha, all you have to do is just fast and pray. Just build up your faith and then you won't have to think about it. Or if I'm feeling suicidal, just go read a psalm, and then it'll be okay. I think there's room for pastors, for imams, for rabbis, for any spiritual leader to give room and to create a ministry for people like Dr. Wills and mental health educators and clinicians to come in and stand alongside them, because they're not equipped for this work. And in my opinion, the work is growing.
I've heard this my whole life. People say, oh, you got to have faith. You got to have faith. And I always remind them, you're right, but faith without works is dead. Have faith about you talking to somebody.
Absolutely.
You know what? It's interesting. Last week, after we did our kind of rehearsal discussion about this topic, I went to worked all day, and then one of my coworkers stopped me and said, hey, I just want to thank you. I just started seeing a therapist. And I was like, why are you thanking me? And she said, you said something that made me want to do that. And we had this disagreement, I'll put it that way. And it left me a little bit angry. And then after a couple of weeks, I was calm enough to say something to the person that said, your behavior's a little frantic and it makes the working environment a little difficult. And we need to figure out how to improve our working relationship. But whatever that was, it sparked something in her to realize that it wasn't just the work environment that was a bit frantic. It was kind of a lot of things. So that leads me to the question, and I'm grateful that God opened that platform for me to say it, because it wasn't even intentional. It was just, a bit of frustration. But words are so key in what we say to people. Sometimes we don't know what we're saying and how it helps. Sometimes we do know what we're saying. How do we speak to somebody? What are some of the best words to use? And I'll open this up to anybody when you suspect that there may be something going on.
I'd say the first one is, do not say that I'm crazy. Crazy is a word that needs to be removed when speaking about mental health. Do not only see the illness and not the individual. Do not use diagnoses as adjectives. I'm not bipolar. I'm a person who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And all of that I can set aside if I can feel the heart. I won't hear a person call me crazy if I can feel that they're genuinely caring about my well-being. And so for any conversation, lead with your heart first. What's your motive? Is it that you just want to get in somebody's business and have a story to tell? Or do you want someone to live? For me, that's the bottom line. I want you to live, and I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I'm even willing for you to be upset with me, but I'm not leaving Publix until I know you're fine. I'm going to be right here with you.
Difficult though, because even that conversation I had with the coworker, it felt at odds with me. Like I didn't feel like it was my place to say anything, but I felt like it was driving all of us, a little off the edge, and our relationship just wasn't working. So even if it's an uncomfortable feeling, how do you get, for example, Elizabeth, how did you get past the uncomfortable feeling of having that conversation with your own child? That had to be hard.
I think it's still a work in progress.
Okay.
But speaking about a family member that was going through depression, I think it's something I've never dealt with or experienced. So I had to realize that just because I didn't experience it or haven't gone through it, doesn't make it not real. And so I had to apologize to that person because I was kind of insensitive about, saying some things that, just get over it, and so I think personally, I've had to realize, just because I haven't experienced it doesn't mean that person isn't struggling with those things. So it's definitely a work in progress as I continue in, my daily walk. So
I'm going to put in a slight plug for the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay and 211. That's a great organization. Full disclosure, I just joined their board, in fact, like within the last 3 or 4 weeks. But I do want to say that because I think sometimes when people don't know how to talk to family members, talking to someone, even if it's someone you can't put a face to, really will be able to help people overcome that.
Rod, I don't think people are aware of how much this pandemic has impacted them. And so when you were speaking with, coworker friend, many of us likely aren't even aware because we're just going through the motions. We're doing our daily Zooms, we're making, doing laundry and cooking and everything. And we're not realizing that our temper is flaring, or we're more impatient, or I don't want anyone around me, or we're snippy and snappy and our focus is off. And it's because we're living in a very different year. And many people think that because they are physically safe, I don't have COVID, I'm not symptomatic, that they're not emotionally and psychologically being impacted by just the constant news cycle. It's been a very heavy year relative to elections and social, racial unrest. It's been nonstop since January, if we think about it, with Kobe. Here we are in December, and every month there's been something to raise our hackles, something to make us just want to tap out of social media. That's taken a toll. And I think Dr. Wills, you can give us some tips on how do we reset in time for 2021?
Yeah.
Or do we even make a vision board? Because it's
Dr. Wills, for example, I talk to my mom every day, 3-4 times a day, because I just, I just got to keep checking on her. And
that's right.
I finally got her to text, so that helps. But the other day I said,
how'd you do that? I ain't got my dad to text yet. Sorry.
It took years, trust me. I said, how are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just a little down. I guess I'm kind of bored. And so my question is, what can I say to my mom in this COVID environment? Because the one place that she had constantly to go to was like a sorority meeting or the church. And because of the fear of COVID, she has not done any of that. So, it's very limited places that she can go. How do you help people navigate through that?
Yes, yes. So coping through COVID is definitely its own thing. But for sure, you want to structure your day. You want to plan your day out. You want to leave time in your day for setting goals, strategizing, dreaming, and thinking about the future. You still want to do that because we're still alive. So we still have goals that we want to accomplish and making room for that. You want to meditate. You want to make sure you're eating healthy. You want to have at least 20 minutes of exercise every day, even if it's just stretching. Because remember what's going on right now, as Natasha said, since February with COVID, is our cortisol levels have been going up. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Cortisol has been up. So we want to do everything we can to keep that cortisol down and to fight it. So we want to fight that with endorphins, right? And endorphins get released when we have exercise. Then oxytocin, social, also combats physical. So even though you can only do it on Zoom or whatever, you still want to go to those Zoom sorority meetings or go to those Zoom churches. Sometimes you can get a little zoomed out. I myself am a little zoomed out, but you still want to make sure you're staying engaged. Pick up the phone. Kids act like they don't know how to use phones anymore. They all text. Pick up the phone. Have a good gab session with a girlfriend. Schedule that time in. Make sure you're doing it. Eating nutritiously, gardening. You want to find ways to get outside. I don't know where your mom lives. If she's down here, walking outside, connecting with nature, going to the bay, connecting with nature fills you up. So all of those kind of self-care things, gratitude journals, prayer, all of those things are important in keeping your mind right during this period when that cortisol is just stress, news cycle, this, that, shooting, this. We got to take charge and proactively make sure that we're combating that stress hormone.
Got a couple questions, and I'll just pose this to the group, and whoever wants to jump in. This question is from CC. How can you open up to someone when you feel like there is no one? That's a good
question. Great question. I actually spoke about this yesterday. The first thing is recognizing that every person isn't going to be able to support you in every way. So there's going to be some people who can give you the emotional support, some that will give you the informational support, some will give you the practical support, like cleaning your house and dropping off, Chick-fil-A. And sometimes talking to a stranger helps. So that could be joining a Facebook group of people who live with a mental illness or feeling depressed, going to therapy, because you have an objective party that isn't coming to you with their narrative and their bias of knowing you when you were 4 or 5 or 18 or 22. It's just an objective person who's going to hear what you have to say and support you based on where you are right now. So there are people, you're not alone. There's a lot of people, 46 million people living in America right now with a mental illness, and even more undiagnosed. So you're not alone.
Have to talk to someone. This is a very interesting question. I kind of alluded to a little bit when I asked about the differences in how Florida handles mental health. How can someone get help for an individual showing signs? This is from Angela, by the way, via Facebook. How can someone get help for an individual showing signs of depression and erratic behavior, wanting help, but no insurance?
Oh, yeah. No, so that's a big one. So no insurance. Usually every jurisdiction, either city or county, is going to have what we call our public mental health system. And there's a lot of stigma against a public mental health system. But I tell you, some of my most tenacious, bright, brilliant colleagues work in public mental health because they feel it is their duty to do so. That is a safety net in every community. It's not as built up and robust as you want it to be in all 50 states. Florida happens to be a state where it's not that robust and built up, but it's there. And then you sort of pair with how you access it. You can access it by calling 211 Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. They can help you figure out what agency in your area is accepting patients that don't have insurance, oftentimes there will be a social worker that is at that agency that will help you get insurance. So they'll help you either get on Medicaid, or if you qualify for Medicare because you have a mental illness that causes you to be disabled, the social worker can help navigate you through that system and get you the insurance that you need. So there's always going to be a safety net, and it's paid for in every city. Every city has sort of, a cost of care consortium where the hospitals build out a safety net, and it's there, it's present, people know how to access it, but unfortunately it's hard to figure out. The best navigator on the planet to me in terms of mental health illness is where Natasha works, and that's NAMI. They know how to find, in a way that no one else knows how to find, resources, because that's one of the things that makes it so hard. Is it's so hard to find resources. There's lack of mental health professionals because, quite frankly, not only is mental health stigmatized, but you're also stigmatized if you are a mental health practitioner. Try being a cute single psychiatrist. Guys are always like, I don't know if I want to date a psychiatrist. So there is something, I don't want anybody read me. So there is something about being a mental health practitioner. Most of your families kind of take you away from it. You don't want to sit up and listen to people's problems all day. You don't want, why would you be a psychiatrist? You could be a pediatrician. You could be a primary care physician. So there's stigma in the field of practitioners. So bottom line, we need more practitioners. We need more people out there who are taking care of, people, and you can find them. And NAMI is a great navigator.
Absolutely. I think, during this pandemic, that's so funny. Yeah, it takes a special person to be with someone who's in the mental health field, because I can talk about mental illness every day, all day, but some people don't want that. During this pandemic, there are people who, because they were unemployed, lost their insurance, can't pay for COVID, and they're on their last pill. And I've said this, over and over repeatedly. Sometimes when you're unable to get your appointment with your primary care physician or a psychiatrist or nurse practitioner, connecting with your pharmacist helps. And it's been a lifesaver for many people, because a doctor will take a call from a doctor quickly. Even though you've left 4 voicemails, a doctor will take a call from a doctor and you can get support that way. Yes, NAMI is an invaluable resource. I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful to have worked alongside Pam at events where we share resources, because NAMI can't do everything. No. Dr. Wills can't do everything. Erin's House can't do everything. But when we come together as community partners to address and to solve and meet the needs of people, that's how we get ahead. It's by getting together. And I'm grateful to be a part.
And there's so many resources out there to help people.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is from Nandi, or it could be Nandi, so I apologize, Nandi or Nandi, if I got the name wrong. Any suggestions? We talked a little bit about this, but I think this is key and we have to keep talking about it. Any suggestions on how to get an adult child to understand that they do have a mental illness and to get help?
I'll start and I'll turn over to you. Anesthesia it's a condition where a person lacks the awareness that they have a condition. And even if a person doesn't have that, they've got to get through the denial. I was in denial for years. I thought that I could pray my way out of it. I can work my way out of it. I can think my way out of it. I can self-help my way into wholeness. And it's not there. And, caregivers, they face a tough, an uphill battle, because a person isn't going to fully embrace treatment and recovery unless they accept that they have a challenge. It's like walking into an emergency room. My intestines are hanging out, but I want you to deal with my paper cut. And that's what a lot of parents and spouses are dealing with. So it's a challenge. And that's why it's so important to connect to other parents and other spouses. And what Erin's House provides is a place where you can learn strategies and learn language, to have those conversations, to hopefully move the needle toward your loved one entering treatment.
And one thing I see a lot in treatment is there may be, we talked about this on the prep show, and she just gave the word. There are some times where people are never going to be able to have insight into their mental illness. There are some people that just will never know. They'll never see it. But they may take medication because they may realize that you love them and you're not going to do anything to harm them, and they sleep better, or it prevents them from going to the hospital. Take your medication so that you don't have to go to the hospital and you don't have to keep going back and forth like we've been doing. And then once they get on the medications, then it may come together for them. So it's a process. It's not something that's going to happen in one conversation and sitting. And I think that's something that sometimes people think. It's a journey. Just like Liz said, her son is taking medications, but does he know he has a mental illness? Maybe, maybe not. And maybe next year he will. So, and I think that's hard for people who don't have a mental illness to fully wrap their heads around that. It's a process. It's a spectrum. It's a journey. So,
Dr. Wills, you know what? You're talking right into the next question, because Nandi had a follow-up to that. Is medication the only treatment for bipolar disorder?
There are some people who have a mild enough form where I would be able to feel comfortable putting them on a trial of omega-3 fatty acids, which are a naturopathic mood stabilizer. But again, some people's form needs more. Some people need medication. Bipolar disorder there's depression. I might tell a patient, you may or may not ever have to be treated for this again. Let's get you on here. Let's get you together for 6 months and we'll see what happens, 5 years from now, or, a year from now. Bipolar, generally speaking, though, is something that's going to need to be treated for a lifetime. Now, it has its own life course and its own natural history. So as people get older, it's more attenuated and it doesn't have the big swings, so they may be able to transition. But those are conversations that you need to have with a doctor. I am a doctor, but with your doctor, you know what I mean, rather than me trying to explain that to you. But yes, by and large, someone with bipolar is going to need to be on medications, and that's okay too. That's okay, because
Coco has a question from Facebook as well. How do you connect with someone who is struggling with undiagnosed anxiety or depression and may need help if a family member desires to seek help for someone who seems to be in despair?
Those kind of situations, I always say, take them to their primary care physician. Usually people have close enough relationships and family relationships with their primary care physician. I know when I was living in Ohio, everybody in my family, we all saw the same doctor. So if talking aunts, nieces, nephews, we all saw Dr. Brown. So if we thought something was going on, we just say, Dr. Brown, such and such and such and such and such and such. And Dr. Brown, the next time they saw that person, would have that context. So family doctors are a big resource in communities. And if you are able to call the family doctor ahead of time, you are allowed to give information to that doctor. They are not allowed to give information to you. So you could say, I don't know if you're treating this patient or not, but if you are, this is my niece, whatever. This is what's been going on, and I wanted to let you know that. You can give information to the primary care physician. Now, they might not be able to validate that it is their patient, but you should be able to know. Primary care physicians are always that first line of defense. As a matter of fact, they treat 70 to 80% of depression. So it's not like just because you have depression, you have to go see a psychiatrist. Usually if you have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, something a little bit more advanced than bipolar, than anxiety and depression, then you'll need to see a psychiatrist. Most anxiety and depression is treated by the frontline practitioner, which is the PCP, and they feel comfortable doing that. So go to your PCP. You don't have to go find a therapist. They should be able to help you navigate to a therapist. Your primary care physician should have relationships with therapists. So that, to me, is really the front door for all mental health issues, is the primary care physician.
Elizabeth, I know this question was specifically about anxiety and depression, but a couple things, because you talked about how it's a journey still with your son. How old was your son when he was diagnosed with schizophrenia? And then the process of getting to that diagnosis, how difficult was that?
He was 19 when he was first diagnosed. He's now 22. So it has been a long journey. And then the more it goes untreated, the harder it is for the mind to kind of heal itself when you're not on medication. So it kind of progressed where he continued to get worse because he wouldn't take the medication. Also, there's just a lack of continuity of care when you try to, get the help for your child that's an adult. Back to the kind of question that person had asked, your hands are pretty tied, especially in the state of Florida. There's no laws that are really in place to help you as the caregiver or parent of an adult child, because they're an adult, they can make their own decisions. You cannot force them to take medication. So really it leaves you with your hands tied. You have to sometimes call the police, and you don't want to call the police. And then you pray that the police are sensitive and have had that training to, understand that this is a mental illness, not that they're just a belligerent, criminal. So.
That has to be hard, because as a mother, you're going, he's 18. I mean, I know in the eyes of the law, he's considered, an adult male, but that's your baby. That's your child.
Yeah.
How do you set aside the difficulty of parenting to be that difficult parent who's got to like, you got to do this. And I also wanted to ask, you said your son didn't like to take the medication. Why? What was it, a stigma issue for him, or what about it didn't he want to take it?
I think what Natasha said, he has anosognosia, where he doesn't believe that he has a mental illness. So it's really a matter of, it's like me telling you that you're not married to your wife, and you're like, yes, I am. Like, it's just something you cannot believe. So that's the hugest challenge, is when your caregiver doesn't have the insight into their mental illness. They don't believe anything's wrong with them. And again, when your hands are tied, they're an adult, they can make their own decisions. So until they get to a point where you have to involve the police, and you hate to do that because you don't want your child to either go to jail or to be, put into a facility where they can't leave, but you have to make those hard decisions, and it's a matter of loving them enough to do that.
And I think because, Erin's house focuses on the caregivers, it's important for caregivers to understand that if you have to call police, you need to give them all of the information that's necessary. So if your child or your spouse or your sibling is sensitive to male police officers or male law enforcement, when you make that call, the non-emergency number, let them know if you have a female deputy, please send them. Let them know they respect authority figures, or they are a veteran. Give them all of the information necessary so they can effectively de-escalate. Fortunately, now in Hillsborough County, you don't have to specify, please send a CIT trained officer, because everyone now has the training. But there is a new behavioral resources unit that you can ask for, and that's where those deputies are trained for these mental health crises. Relative to medication, no, medication isn't the only thing, but it's important for people to know that medication isn't the end all be all. It is, for me, I look at it as an opportunity for me to buy some time to work out some other strategies and coping skills. My diagnosis is bipolar disorder. I've been on medicine for years. There's a time where I didn't need it, but then when life happens, you may need to go back on it, and it's okay. You may need the mood stabilizer or the anti-anxiety or the antidepressant. You may need it, and it's okay. And caregivers need to know that sometimes people don't want to take it because of the side effects. The side effects, the headaches, the nausea, the grinding of the teeth, the nerves. It's something that everyone has to work through, and different people have different tolerance for it.
I have one final question from Facebook, and I'll let whoever wants to answer this answer it. It's from Cece. It says, can you give us a basic rundown of how to go about getting the proper diagnosis if you feel like you may have a mental health issue? And I think this is a great last question for us to answer.
I would
say,
echo. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I would say start with your primary care physician. And then, don't try to self-diagnose. Go to, they will probably send you to either a clinical social worker or a psychologist first. Those are people who are empowered and licensed, and credentialed to diagnose, they would be the ones to be able to say, hey, you may need to see a practitioner. So I'd start with your primary care physician, and then move on to mental health professionals from there if you were trying to figure out whether you have a diagnosis. I wouldn't try to read it in a book or do anything like that. There are people who go to school for a long time to be able to, to diagnose others.
And I'll add to that because I think there is an inherent fear of having anything on the proverbial record. You know, many people aren't sure, well, will a Baker Act show up on a background check? I'm trying to be CEO. I'm trying to make partner. Will this doctor have? And so there is some room to do some research of symptoms. I'll tell you that entering into support groups and hearing other people's stories, I'm like, oh, okay, wow, okay, so I'm not weird because I speak to myself. All right, great. It will build up the courage, if necessary, to say, all right, let me have the conversation. It'll dispel the myths so that seeing a practitioner isn't as scary.
Yeah. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with people, each of you? And I'll start with Elizabeth, and just final thoughts for those who are watching as we begin to wrap up this session.
Yeah, I think just knowing that you're not alone, that there's other people going through the exact same thing that you are. And you just have to search and reach out to those people to, you know, have the support that you need to get through, you know, everyday situations with your loved ones.
Absolutely.
Dr.
I'd
Wills?
say,
sorry, go ahead.
Mental health is health. To the parents, you didn't do anything to cause this condition with your child. To the spouses, you didn't do anything wrong. And it is absolutely important that you secure your oxygen mask first. Self-care is hugely important to the role of the caregiver because there is such thing as compassion and care fatigue. So do make sure that you take care of yourself as well.
Absolutely. And Dr. Wills, last but certainly not least.
Same thing. Mental health is health. Mental health is health. That's just the bottom line. And we got to think more about our emotional and mental well-being, and make sure that we put room for that in society. And let's keep talking. Let's keep having these conversations. It's so important to break down the stigma, and make sure that people feel empowered to talk and ask questions about themselves, and check in on themselves.
Ladies, thank you so very much for this robust and wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you for your passion.
Stop. I'm going to be honest with you. I had text to say, you got to stop talking. No, I mean, honestly, I joke about that, but this is a conversation that I think is so needed, and we can have it every single day of the week. And I'm glad that we're breaking down some of those stereotypes and those stigmas and just having a discussion, because like I love what you said. Mental health is health, and we have to take care of ourselves. I'm going to remind everybody that they can click the link in the description below for PayPal or a credit card to donate to Aaron's House and keep this great organization going. Also, if you'd like to, you can do Cashapp, $Caregivers813. Thank you to everybody who was watching on Facebook, and we appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep the conversation going. And thank you guys. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and we'll sign off for now. We're going to be right back in a minute from a message from our founder, Pam. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Rally for Support will be right back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. The first panel was amazing. And it was just so awesome because as I was listening to the panelists and each speaker, I was thinking when my son, Aaron, who's here, and let me digress for a moment that if you don't know me, I started Aaron's House because my son, Aaron, who was 30 years old, passed away during a psychotic episode. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And after his passing, I founded the organization as a way to help caregivers that were similarly situated like myself. But I was just thinking, if there was an organization like Aaron's House around whenever my son was diagnosed at the age of 18 and he passed away at 30, that I would have fared so much better. But, you know, I'm just amazed at the information that Aaron's House disseminates throughout the course of our foundation. So I'd like to give a few shout outs to some donations, and thank you very much as they're coming in, and just keep them coming in. We have 2 anonymous donations for $5. Aaron H. donated $50. Thank you so much. And thank you for the anonymous donors. Nisi J donated $50 and Cece donated $100 and Susie J donated $250. Thank you all very, very much for your support and for your donation. Remember, if you donate, make a donation of $25 or more, you will receive this Aaron's House mask that says Mental Health Matters, and for a donation of $25 or more. But no donation is too small or too large. Our next segment is going to be Thriving and Surviving. Thriving and Surviving Mental Illness. So our host will be the beautiful and talented Angela Robinson of Tyler Perry's Haves and Have-Nots. This time she won't be appearing as a villainous attorney, but she'll be here to support mental health awareness and mental illness, as this is a foundation, Aaron's House, that she holds close to her heart. But remember to keep the questions and questions coming in. But before we get to Angela, let me ask you, did you see our creative director, Motown Maurice, on The Price is Right a couple of weeks ago? That's right, Motown Maurice was on The Price is Right. What was amazing about it is that he gave a shout out to Aaron's House on national TV. Thank you, Motown. And we're just so happy for him for shouting us out, and he didn't do too bad himself. Stay tuned for this video.
Actual retail price is $800. Motown! Motown! What's up, man? Right there in the green mark. Woo! Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Bring it in.
Man, what do you do for a living?
I work for a nonprofit organization which supports the caretakers of the mentally ill. I'm the creative director.
Oh, good for you. Welcome to the show. We have a nice prize for you. Go ahead, George.
How about a new car?
Hello, everybody. And welcome back to Thriving and Surviving Mental Illness. We are happy that you have joined in on this wonderful and relevant and needed conversation. And we're happy to also present to you more panelists. So we're going to ask some more questions and get some more very, very important answers. So let me introduce you first. I'm Angela Robinson. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. Jennell Wallace is a caregiver. Betty Boudreaux is a caregiver as well. Wendy Pethybridge is a licensed mental health counselor, and Ashley Guyton, a yoga instructor. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we are going to start out by just asking you some questions. We are also going to get some questions from our listening audience and our viewing audience, but I'm going to start out by asking you some questions as well. So this first question is for Wendy. Wendy, what is a caregiver and who can be a caregiver?
All right, so a caregiver or a caretaker basically just refers to anybody who provides care for another person. All right, usually a caregiver is going to help relieve burdens and provide support for an individual who's in need. And it really can vary just depending on the individual and what their needs are. So it can be from bathing and doing some grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, to driving our loved ones to doctor's appointments, things like that. That also can include companionship. All right, so we're providing some type of help that is needed where if the individual didn't have our support, they wouldn't do necessarily as well. So we can provide this care, whether it's short-term or long-term, but the care regardless is so important. All right. And caregivers can be a wide range of individuals. We're mostly seeing a lot of family members. So parents, they may have adult children who need additional supports. It could actually be adult children providing care for their family members as they're aging, or just to help them with their mental health concerns. It can be siblings, it can be friends, and it can also be members of our community, including like members from like our church. So family, like close family, friends, caregivers can be a wide range of individuals.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Jennell. Jennell is a caregiver to her 18-year-old adult son with learning disabilities who lives with her. Jennell, when did you discover your loved one had a mental illness?
He was diagnosed with a 7-year delay when the school psychologist examined him. But I was in denial for 10 years. I tried to get him to just go with the flow and go with the norm. And by the time he was 10 years old, he had extreme anger for no reason. So then I started, seeing a doctor for him. And from there, it's just been, a learning process for us both. And that's why I joined Aaron's house, because it's so much we don't know about our parents. I knew there were some things, some issues with my parents, but they're both, they're gone now. And I started asking my auntie about their, past and their, her sister, my mom's sister, I started talking to her, confiding in her. Was there any issues with my mom growing up with her? So I'm just doing research and I'm learning. I'm learning as I go, but he's 18 years old and he's still, I'm homeschooling him now, and that's what I learned. He's an empath. He's sensitive, and that's what his angers were about. Sensitive to other people's energies. And it gave him anxiety and it made him angry. And this is what, we had to get to the bottom of. What's wrong? Why is he angry? So it's still a process. And he's better. Now that I'm homeschooling him, he's better. I'm better. And I'm still learning. We're still learning. And I'm happy I'm in a group. I'm in a place of like-minded people that have the same issues. And, it's getting better. My depression is getting better because I have a family now, like-minded people.
Yeah, you have a community. Jennell, tell us, what are some of the challenges that you were facing? Just name one or two.
He would go to school and didn't get along with any of his teachers. It's just something they would say that would trigger his anger. And on top of him going to school, by the time he got to school riding a bicycle, he have asthma. So in Florida, it's a lot of pollen. So that triggered his anger,
And what was the thing that made you come out of denial? What was the thing that happened that made you say, okay?
The thing that happened that made me say, okay, was he went to school and told his teacher I was going to kill him. Okay. And they are mandated to report that. We ended up in an open case with DCF. That was my rock bottom.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for that. My next question, Betty. Betty is a caregiver to her adult 18-year-old son who lives with her, who has mental illness health diagnosis as well. Betty, explain some of the difficulties that you experience with an adult child with mental health disorder.
Sure. My son is still in high school, so he's in his last year, and it's really difficult to, communicate with his peer group and with his school and with his teachers, because he's not going to be probably a traditional type of student. There's there's probably a different path for him that we're finding and that we're learning about. And it's just kind of natural that people would say at his age, oh, have you applied for colleges? Or have you, what's your SAT score? And those types of things. So we're just venturing into adulthood, but there are a lot of milestones that come with it, come with the territory. And it's probably very innocent for people to talk about. And I've been guilty of that in the past. When people hit milestones, you just automatically ask. But it's really interesting to try to address that and, and do it with integrity and empathy and just to make him feel really good about himself, because he's really working hard to do what he can do.
Yes. And how did you hear about Aaron's house?
I was connected through our doctor, and she connected us, and it's been about a year that I've been involved, and it's been a wonderfully supportive year. I've had the journey for quite a while. It's been over 10 years now, and I felt pretty alone. I don't have friends who have children in the same situation. The things that we have to think about and plan for, I just don't even know who to ask for advice. And when I attend meetings at Aaron's house, I have people exactly like me, and maybe people who were in my shoes 5 years ago, and I can get a glimpse of some of the things to come and see some of the hopeful signs that I didn't even know existed. So it's been instrumental for me.
That's wonderful to hear. I want to introduce our audience to Ashley Guyton. You may wonder, why is a yoga instructor here for this conversation? Well, Ashley's going to tell you why she's here. Ashley, how long have you been a yoga instructor, and why are you passionate about it?
So I've been teaching for about 2 years, but my yoga journey started the physical practice about 8 years ago. But I have a history of mental illness in my maternal side of my family, and I've been taking care of my mother. And about 5 years ago, my mom had passed, and I really came to this juncture in my life where I realized I was wrung out. I had given as much as I could to take care of my mom and others. I had forgotten how to take care of myself. So I embarked on what I call my yoga journey, which is really discovering the full practice of yoga, which is mind, body, and spirit. So the physical movement, the breath work, the meditation, and it has completely transformed my life. And in terms of teaching, I love sharing it. And especially my heart has a deep-seated fondness for caregivers.
Tell us about the breathing exercises that you've done with caregivers, pre-COVID, of course, but tell us about that.
So the beauty of yoga is you can practice in a community, or you can practice alone on your own mat or on your carpeting at home. So the breath work is one of the elemental parts of yoga. And the breath work that I find to be most beneficial is called Nadi Shodhana, which means alternate nostril breathing. And I'll share it with you real quickly here so that you all can take this back and utilize it. But it's very simple, but the beauty of it is being alternate nostril is that you're going to balance the right and left hemisphere of your brain, which calms that central nervous system and allows you to become more present, more peaceful, and in a position of responding to circumstances from a non-violent perspective, because we all know how we can be pushed into a corner or come into a tense, anxious moment, and we tend to just fight back instead of being present. So quickly, if we can try this together, take a deep breath in, and then exhale out the nose. Take your left fist, place it under your right armpit. Take your right thumb and ring finger. Use the right thumb to close your right nostril. Take a deep breath in. Take your ring finger, close the opposite nostril, and exhale out the right. Deep breath in through the right nostril. And exhale out the left. Close that right nostril. Inhale through the left. Close left. Exhale out the right. Now, I know we have a lot of great issues to get to, but that is the idea here. Closing left, closing right, and alternating back and forth, and keep that rhythm. And then when you've done that about 10 times, just let your fingers come to your thighs, take a deep breath in, and let that all settle in. So I think that's the best breath work that you can turn to.
Thank you. Ashley, what's the purpose of the hand under the arm?
So it's a couple of things. We're applying some constriction here. So we're bringing that warmth, that sort of that hug across the body and underneath the armpit. We're providing a place for that right arm to rest too, because you can make this breathwork practice go just as long as you need to really draw you inward and provide that calming sense. So both sort of a medicinal perspective as well as a practical.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You. And we have some other questions, so I'll come back to you, Ashley, as well. Our therapist, Wendy Pethybridge, I'm coming back to you. So what is the role of a licensed mental health therapist?
So we actually can provide multiple roles. We can actually help from the perspective of doing groups. So I facilitate a group with Aaron's House, actually. So I do 2 of their 3 groups each month. And so we run groups, so we do individual therapy, we can do family therapy as well. So our role is really to be able to help out the family. We can use multiple different types of perspectives, but what I like most is that when there is a conflict within the family, we can actually bring the entire family in to help them actually work through the problems. Now, specifically with like caregiving, I often help families work out issues around like medications, all right? Not all people who have mental health issues need to take them, but those who do, those who use them, sometimes they can cause a little bit of conflict because maybe the actual individual doesn't want to take them. All right, and it can be a little bit of a challenge, and we can help, I can help out to talk about boundaries. All right, that's one of the most important things that I talk about, and also the power of no. So helping the caregiver be able to understand like what boundaries they want to have with their loved one, and also recognizing that they have limits too. All right, so the things that they're able to provide, we need to make sure that we're not burning out and we're there for them and providing as much love and care as we possibly can, while also respecting like we also have our limits. We have to take care of ourselves as well. We're there also to help to prevent decompensation. All right, so I really like to help my patients understand like what declining really looks like for them. So what are their triggers? What are things that are activating for them? Is there negative self-talk that they really struggle with that's really preventing them from being able to move forward? And we talk about the consequences of those, because consequences can be positive and negative. And I also really encourage my caregivers to seek out a personal perspective from their loved ones, so that they're not taking the perspective of power. So they're not making the role where they are the ones who are determining every aspect of treatment and care. We want to actually include our loved ones. And sometimes when you have like children taking care of their adult parents, sometimes that power balance is a little bit off, and we have a hard time being able to recognize like how do I actually tell my mother that, you know, she needs to go to bed at like 9 o'clock or she's not going to do well tomorrow. Or, you know, trying to tell my adult son that, you know, you really need to have this bedtime, or you really need to shower because, you know, you're not smelling all that great, right? We're really needing to be able to have these like very difficult conversations. So in that therapeutic setting, we can really talk about that. And in our groups, we talk a lot about the importance of like attending appointments, being involved with them, going to our psychiatry appointments and talking with the psychiatrist, being aware of like what are the potential side effects and things like that. So we talk about things like having a relapse prevention plan. All right. So how can I actually help you when you're not feeling well? So whether I am your therapist or whether I'm your caregiver, I want to be able to know, like, how can I actually help you when you're not feeling well? I love being very like prevention focused. So how can I actually help you? And one of the big things that I like to do is promote having a crisis plan. All right. Our loved ones can have moments where they're really struggling, and it can be absolutely vital to have a plan in place so that we can actually act when they're needing us to do so. And when our loved one can actually tell us prior to them decompensating, like what type of higher level treatment they want and where they feel safest, it's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to help them to get that type of treatment. So if our loved one needs inpatient care because maybe they are having thoughts of suicide, maybe they need medication stabilization, if they already have that crisis plan together, we may actually be able to say, okay, we know that you're having thoughts of suicide, and you said that these are the top 3 hospitals that you'd be okay going to. Where should we go tonight? Because I'm very scared for you. Right. So I like being able to have a collaborative model. I like involving the family, getting as many supports as possible. So those are some of the things that we talk about in our groups at Erin's house. So we want to be able to come up with agreements and plans, like how can we actually really help out our loved ones. And then also as a therapist too, I also talk about the importance of having like power of attorney paperwork. In some states, it really is necessary, especially in states where you're not necessarily able to make choices without having that power of attorney. And sometimes depending on the functioning of your loved one. For example, those who are on the autism spectrum that have lower levels of functioning, they may be nonverbal. We need even to talk about guardianship paperwork. So we want to basically take the elephant and bring it to like life, that we need to talk about it. So that's pretty much what I like to do from a therapist perspective and also from a caregiver. I think that those things are super important.
Those are all great points. Wendy, can you define decompensation just so everybody can know what exactly it is?
Yes. So decompensation is just basically a big word for how our loved one is declining. All right. So if we have a patient who, let's just say our loved one, they struggle with bipolar disorder. All right. One of the things that I have noticed is mania. So if our loved one is all of a sudden doing things where they're all of a sudden having big bouts of like creativity, or they may be shopping a bit more than they usually do, even behaviorally, kind of like noticing pacing, maybe they're biting their fingers. So they're basically starting to have behaviors that used to be controlled, and now we're seeing them. All right. Decompensation for declining for like depression may involve like thoughts of suicide. It may also be things like isolation, where they're just really trying to like get themselves away from everybody else. They just kind of want to not do anything, not go anywhere. So basically decompensation just means that they are starting to decline, and that is a sign that we may need to come in and provide some type of an intervention.
Thank you. My other question for you is, what value do you believe Erin's House, this organization, brings to the community?
So I love their groups. Okay. I think our support groups for our caregivers are absolutely vital. All right. The first major thing that we do is that we're able to provide a perspective. All right. We have a lot of parents that are coming in. We have a lot of family members who they absolutely love the person that they're caring for, but they're exhausted, right? So they're emotionally burnt out and they don't have supports, and they have been trying to do this on their own for so long. So we provide like compassion and empathy for them. And we're able to also provide them with real-time interventions. So real world, this is what you can do. And sometimes we may have a parent who, or just a caregiver, caretaker, not necessarily a parent, but we may have a caregiver who's really struggling and in a place of crisis. And we actually can take that time and provide them with like real things that they can do right now. And I really think that this is just an absolute vital service that we're providing for our community. There are not a lot of groups that focus on caregivers. All right. I think that caregivers are often just are underrepresented. Like they just are not given like the supports and the resources that are absolutely necessary. And the role that they play in our communities are just absolutely vital. And so we need more of these types of groups. We really do. And Aaron's House, their groups really provide a real life perspective. And we are there for all of like our caregivers. And I think that this is an absolute vital resource that our communities really need to have.
Yes. Our caregivers are really our heroes. And
yes.
We feel that way about you, Jennell and Betty. And we're so glad that you're here with us to share your story. Jennell, how has Aaron's House, what role has Aaron's House played in your ability to care for your son? I know community is one thing that you got from it, but can you tell us some other things that you've gotten from it?
Well, I've known Pamela Robinson, since I was a kid. So we came up together in the same church, and we got to know each other. I feel like me and Pamela is cut from the same fabric. Her heart is just so big and tender. And before I knew of Aaron's House, I confided in Pam about my son. So she was giving me advice before I even joined the group. So when I joined the group, and listened to other stories and listened to other families, it just gave me a place. It gave me a place. And yeah, that's how it started. Just talking to her being a shoulder, busy as her life is, she would take the time. She's an attorney. You pay for information. Mm-hmm. But she took the time and let me cry on her shoulder. She was a sister first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah, I do too. Betty, how about you? Tell us how Aaron's House has helped you. We know that it's helped you with community and being around family. Are there any other ways you want to share?
Yeah, I think it is helping me learn what I need as a caregiver. It's certainly, I'm the last person on the list because I'm not in crisis. And I realized over the years that I'm not as good of a caregiver if I'm completely depleted. And it's hard to see that. And when you're in these groups and, we're talking about boundaries and we're talking about challenging situations, it's, you're so in the moment of day to day that you're not thinking like that. And that's just been revolutionary to me. When somebody on my first call a year ago said, well, what are you doing for you and your husband's relationship? And I'm like, that's a really odd question because obviously the answer is nothing. And then when we had a pretty long discussion about how we needed to figure out a way to get, time away, even if it was 15 minutes, to not be in the situation that would be that would be helpful to us and we would be better for it. That was, I couldn't even see that. I just couldn't see it at all. And, as new situations come upon us, I didn't even know what I didn't know. And I think that is really helpful too, because somebody will just say, as Wendy mentioned, do you have power of attorney? And I'm like, what is that? What do I need to do? And how do I apply for some of the things I need to do? I don't know what I don't know. And it's not like there's a super handy handbook for it. Everybody's situation can be so different and to different extremes. But with a group like this, it just keeps me grounded and helps me feel more confident in our care plan.
Yeah. It's so good just to know that you're not alone, that you're not the only one that's going through this. So it's even your being here in this moment today is saying to all of the viewers out there that they are not alone and that they have a community. And with this particular outreach and this particular way of communicating, they don't even have to be local to experience what Erin's House has done for you. They can be anywhere in the world and be a part of this moment of looking at this and realizing, wow, that's me. I'm not alone. So that's the value of this, and that's the value of you being so generous with your time to share your story. Back to Ashley just for a minute. Ashley, how can, does someone contact you for a private session, or do you just go around to these groups, or how do they get in touch with Ashley and start breathing and start getting on this journey?
Well, so right now, all of my teaching is through Kodawari Studios. So you can go online, check out their website. They also offer many, many classes online through the Mind Body application that you can download on your phone. But I will encourage you, there are so many resources for yoga. Granted, I think Kodawari is the very best place, but it's more important that you find the practice, the means of delivery that speaks to you. So also share that there's an app out there called Insight Timer, INSIGHT Timer. It's a guided meditation application, and I have personally found it a great resource. So I think there's just so many different ways. I love to help. Erin's House is really my primary focus. And I want to piggyback on what somebody else was saying. One of the things that I love about yoga is that through your yoga practice, you're taught, you continually practice, not assigning judgment, no judgment to thoughts, no judgment to how you're feeling right then, just letting go and just allowing that feeling state to enter your body. I've been to the Erin's House meetings, and one of the hallmarks of their meetings are, it is such a safe place. It is a community of people who are making themselves vulnerable and are completely non-judgmental. So there's such a power in a practice, whether it's yoga or this support group, where you are receiving that sort of nurturing presence, where people are available to you and you feel like you can reveal issues that are sensitive and important to you. So kudos to Pamela and all that organization is doing. I've witnessed it firsthand.
Wonderful. Just before we do have a couple of questions from our viewing audience. Thank you guys for sending in your questions. But before we do that, I just want to know one thing that you've done for yourself for self-care. I want to know one thing from Jennell, and I want to know one thing from Betty that you have done. Jennell, you first.
I bike.
Okay, that's good.
Yay!
Yay! I know that's huge, taking the time to go away and bike. So that's good. Awesome. Yeah. All right, Betty.
That was my answer too. We have bike trails around our neighborhood, and I haven't really had the chance to go explore them, but at least every Saturday, but I was doing it last night too. I just go explore and get lost in nature, and there's something rejuvenating about that to me. So I've found the right times that I can do it, and I just make sure I'm regularly doing it. Even if it seems like it's not the best use of time, it's always time well spent.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I'm glad you're doing it. Wonderful. So Coco, in our viewing audience, had this question. For adult children undiagnosed, what's the best way to get help? I'm going to give that question to Wendy.
The best way for them to get help. So I would actually first start out with a therapist if possible. Because we can actually help them to diagnose, to actually see if they have a diagnosis. They may actually have had just a really hard time. Like right now with COVID, this pandemic has been really hard for pretty much everybody. All right. And a lot of my patients who are coming are actually first time in therapy, and they don't necessarily need to have like medications. And often people are going to psychiatry, which there is definitely a place for psychiatry. But if we can actually get to a therapist, let's actually increase our coping strategies, okay? That is actually one of the first things that I do with my patients is we're like, okay, so things are not, you're not coping as well as you used to. There's all of these new challenges that are here. Let's actually first see like if we can actually increase our coping skills, because maybe it is something that is a little bit more temporary. All right, maybe you're having a flare up. All right, and we're able to actually help to do differential diagnosing. We can actually see, are you actually having like major depressive disorder? You may actually be having like general anxiety disorder. So a mental health professional like myself, psychologists as well, they can do testing assessments to actually see what is actually happening, what is going on. If you're having any type of a hard time, definitely reach out to us, because this is what we do. We love being able to hear our clients' stories and see what we can do to actually help out, because there is so much that we can do to help our patients go through these hard times. And one of the first things that I like to address is like, how are we actually coping? There's tons of self-soothing techniques. There are really good, healthy distractions, and we have opposite actions, emotional awareness, mindfulness, like Ashley was talking about with the meditation practices, things that are grounding. And being able to have like a crisis plan to help us when we're not at our best. So I would really recommend that we start out with therapy. It's a great place to kind of like talk about everything in a safe and open environment.
That is wonderful. So we are going to wrap it up. I just want to take a moment and say again, thank you. I will be cheering you on your bike rides. I do the same. So we'll be bike riding in different parts of the country together. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing your expertise with us, for encouraging us to breathe.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's so, it's really kind of funny how we forget that one major thing, right? So thank you for sharing the exercise and your gift with us. And of course, Wendy, I have it all. Crisis plan, boundaries, the power of no, decompensation, negative self-talk. We got it. I hope you guys got it, because I have it. And we need to really think about all of the things that Wendy has shared with us so that we can move forward. I also want to tell you that this is a fundraiser. And while we have shared some great information, it is a fundraiser, and we are raising money for Aaron's House. And you've heard the benefits of what Aaron's House is doing in the community with caregivers. And we would love it if you would make a donation today. You can click the link in the description below, PayPal with your credit card. There's a Cashapp as well. The Cashapp is Caregivers 813. Again, Caregivers 813. And why? Why is that important? Why is it important that you give to Aaron's House today? There are many reasons. You've heard them. You've heard two amazing reasons right here. You've heard from Jennell and Betty and how finding community gave them strength to go on. So those are two reasons right there. But you don't know Pam Robinson. If you don't know her, you should read her story. And you should read about how she started Erin's House and the things that happened in her life that inspired her to start Erin's House. It's a story about taking the deepest, hardest things that happen in your life and using that pain to serve others. It's a great story of overcoming. And I don't think what Pam has been through, you ever really overcome, but it's a great story about the way we use our pain. And she has truly used it to serve others. And if you can find it in your heart, no matter where you are today, to dig deep in your pockets, and we take small and large. We're not, if you got $2, we'll take it. But if you got 2,000, we'll take that too. Find it in your hearts to give to this very, very important organization, Erin's House. We would love for you to be a part of the family. And as I said, in our culture today, as difficult as it is, we don't have to be in the same city anymore. So you can support an organization that will support you no matter where you live. We are so glad that you took the time to spend some time with us this afternoon. And we'll be right back with our founder. You'll get to meet her yourself, so stick around.
Rally for Support will be right back.
We are back, and I just hope that you were as blessed as I was through all the panelists. You know, they delved into their deepest, most intimate personal lives, and we just thank them so much for helping us with this event. It was an amazing event, and I hope you feel the same way. I'd like to give a shout out for a few donors. Kenneth H. donated $50. Sabrina W. donated $70. Julian donated $150, and we just had an anonymous donor to donate $500. Yay! And the donations keep streaming in. So thank you very, very much. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And remember, we're still taking donations, and for a donation of $25 or more, you get this beautiful Erin's House face mask. Just remember to list your email or your mailing address so that we can mail you the mask. Before we end, I'd like to shout out all of the participants today because they each were awesome. We'd like to thank Mr. Rod Carter. He did an amazing job as well, as usual. We'd like to thank Dr. Marketa Wills, and we wish her the very best on her role as a Chief Medical Officer for Johns Hopkins Healthcare. We'd like to thank Natasha Pierre for telling us what to do and for sharing her life experience with us so that she can help others. And we would like to thank a staunch supporter and caregiver of Erin's House, Miss Elizabeth Cowen. Our second panel, we'd like to thank the one and only Miss Angela Robinson, who came out, showed up and showed out. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit Erin's house today. We really appreciate you. We'd like to thank Jennell Wallace and Betty Boudreaux for giving us a look into what their lives were. You know, this is so personal, but the thing about Erin's house is it's a place where you can go and you can share and you won't be judged by other people. And we just love that about Erin's house. And all of us, all of the caregivers just seem just like family, the family we are. And we thank you too for sharing with us. And we thank the amazing Wendy Pethybridge, therapist, who donates her time unselfishly to Erin's house to give support and share her expertise with the many caregivers that we see almost on a weekly basis. So again, we thank everyone that tuned in today, and we thank you for your donations. And we hope that you were educated and enlightened. And we hope that those who are struggling or our caregivers can walk away with hope, knowing that you are not alone. Before I close, I would be remiss if I wouldn't thank Miss Atara Williams, who was the assistant producer of this event, and Mr. Motown Maurice, the showrunner, the producer, the head honcho, the everything for putting this event together. Without Motown, we couldn't have made it. It wouldn't have been possible. And we thank you all so much. And finally, if you know of a caregiver who's struggling, please let them know about Erin's house and let them know we are here for them. I'd like to say, God bless you all. Stay safe, have a wonderful day, and do not suffer in silence. Bye-bye.
Hey, Pam.
Hey, Pam.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Pam.
Birthday, Pam.
We love you. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. This was an awesome birthday gift. I couldn't have asked for more. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for helping putting this together, Atara, and for you putting it together, Motown. You did an awesome job.
We love you.
Love you more.
Bye.
Bye.